Hey everyone, we are back and I hope you enjoyed your break and you were able to get some stuff done. One of the things I forgot to mention before we went on break was it is probably a good idea for you to wash out your paintbrushes and get yourself some new water because you were using a lot of black paint to do the last section. And now you're going to be migrating into some lighter colors that you might not want that black and that darkness that was in your water to translate into the finished product. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and get started now. So one of the first things that we're going to start on next is we're really going to work on that nighttime sky, that really colorful part. So we're now going to start dipping into our mixing white station instead of our pure white and really think about other colors. So our nighttime sky in the original picture had green, and we don't have green. It also had like a magenta color, as well as some light blue and some just yellows by itself. So, taking us back on a trip down memory lane, back to some basic color mixing theory. If you take blue and you take yellow and you mix those two things together, what color do they make? They make green. This is one of those colors that when I was growing up, didn't make sense to me. Now it does. But you can mix together a ratio. I tend to like a little bit less blue in my green than I like yellow. So it's not really a 50-50 ratio. It's more of like a math. It's like 2/3 yellow to 1/3 blue is really what I like doing. But it's your choice. The next color that we're going to be using, I'm just going to wash that out right now because I'm just going to work on mixing some colors for a second. The next thing is I'm going to pull from that mixing white and then I'm going to make my magenta color. So I'm going to pull a little bit of this red and I'm going to mix those two together. So here's a pink, but if you want to get it a little bit more purpley, take a touch of blue and it'll kind of help calm that down if it's a little too bright for you. So, and if it's too light still, just mix that in. And there we go, I have some nice magenta. And again, wash out your paintbrush. And the last couple colors are colors that I can just kind of mix as we're going because it's just true blue. Okay, so what I'm gonna start out by doing is I'm gonna use that straight white and I'm gonna put another layer of it in the middle here. So I'm gonna bring this in. You can use your flat paintbrush for this. You can use your round paintbrush. You can use your big one. It's really your choice. But right now what I'm working on doing is I'm working on really getting some white mixed in, bringing that into our painting. Because sometimes black really eats colors. And if you don't like those brush strokes on the edge, you can add a little water, kind of help fan those out. A little water to your paintbrush and help kind of mix those. Okay, so now I'm gonna wash out my paintbrush, go to my paint palette, wipe it off, blot it off on our paper towel, and then I get to just kind of plug and chug. I get to decide where I wanna mix in some of these colors. I'm gonna mix in a little bit up here. And the fun part about this is that you get to make it your own. You get to do it how you want, the way you want it. And you can layer up colors. So maybe you're like, I wish that was a little bit brighter. You can do a layer now. And then when we are down here doing trees, you can add another layer. But remember, wash out your paintbrush in between each color. And then I'm gonna take maybe some yellow. Maybe bring some yellow down here. Now be careful. When you're doing straight up yellow, and you have a wet blue underneath, you're gonna get green. So if you don't want green and you want some straight yellow, keep it away from blue. And maybe I'm gonna put some over here. And that green, again, is probably just gonna happen naturally. So if you don't want green, probably don't use yellow. Maybe a little bit up here. And I know it looks kind of messy right now, but we'll put another layer of white towards the end and kind of saturate that whole picture with it. And maybe I want to actually get some of that green in here. And I mixed it with some of that mixing white. mix it into some spaces. I apologize, my mail truck is coming, so it might be loud. And I'm just gonna have fun with my colors right now. Mixing things. If you wanna add some purple to this, personally, I love my jewel tones. So purple is when you mix red and you mix blue together. Sometimes white helps with too with that purple. Kind of mix that in. Okay, so just have fun with it. Like, paint colors that make you happy. If you don't like how you've lost a lot of that nighttime sky color, or how you can still see too much of that nighttime sky, again, we can come back and we can add another layer to it. For right now, I am gonna leave this alone for my nighttime sky. The stars and things like that, we're gonna actually do at the end with a special technique. But I'm gonna leave that alone. So on our road, so next thing is we're gonna go to the road. I am gonna continue to use my angled paintbrush, because it'll give me a nice skinny line. But at this point, if you want to transition to a medium paintbrush or to a skinny paintbrush, is really your choice. But we're gonna make those highlights of the lane markers going down the side of the highway right now. So I'm gonna take this pile right here, where there's a little bit of blue already mixed into the white, and I'm just gonna use that blue. And I'm gonna use the edge of my paintbrush, and I'm gonna draw with it. Remember that lane should get thicker as it gets closer and thinner as it gets farther away. So again, I'm going to take a little bit more, barely touch the paper as it gets farther away, and press down harder to make it thicker as it gets closer. Using a technique called dry brush, I'm actually just going to do, meaning like it barely has any paint on it, I'm going to show those lanes in the middle, or the lines in the middle of the lanes. I apologize for the children screaming next door. There we go. I have my lane markers. Ta-da! Done. Okay, so now, again, I can literally use the same paintbrush for this whole painting. I'm going to start adding some trees. So taking that black, and again, you could do straight up black if you want. You could mix black with some red. You know what? Maybe that's actually what I'll do. I'll mix black with a little bit of red and put it over here. So a little red, now a little blue too, make it have a little more depth to it. And we're gonna start making happy little trees. So when we're doing these trees, I want you to think about going across and up. So you're using so at the bottom of these trees, they're gonna be thicker. And as they get farther up, they're gonna be thinner. So you gotta make sure that your trees are actually thick enough to begin with so that you can actually bring them up and be the height that you want them to be. So my paintbrush is starting to run out of paint. That's why it's starting to mix into the background color. And we're not actually gonna worry about stems right now for these trees. If you want to, if it's really bothering you, just do a line down the middle. But the thing is, if you do a whole line, it doesn't quite look right. So it'll be broken up, just like that. Okay, so remember, we need to remember the illusion of depth. So the illusion of D-E-P-T-H, that things are getting farther away, they're darker, they're smaller, they're less detailed. They're also farther up in the picture, so they're closer to the horizon line. So this will be one of my smaller trees. So again, I used some red. Maybe I want to use a little bit more. Maybe I'm taking some green. Like, I want to just have fun with my colors for these trees. And I'm going to make it a little bit bigger, a little bit farther down in the picture plane. And I'm going to layer it up. So again, and I'm going across and back. When you start to run out of paint, pick up more. What starts to happen with this acrylic paint, if that's what you're using, is if it's in a state of like half drying, it's gonna start, like the underlayer, it'll start picking up the other color. So what can sometimes happen is you wind up pulling up a layer from before and you're like, wait a second, I don't want it to look like that. If that's what's happening, it means that your paint is kind of in this weird in-between state of drying. So don't paint in that area. Paint maybe on the other side. Again, I'm gonna just pick up some color. Maybe this one's gonna be even more green because it's closer. And I'm going to go off my page with this because I'm just doing a like press down, lift up, press down, lift up, and pulling it along. I know it's kind of hard to see because it's black, but, and we'll bring in some more color into these things later on. And I'll show you how to do that in a little bit. And don't forget, things in nature overlap each other, so that helps make it look more realistic as well. There we go. Bring it and overlap that a little bit over there. See how it's starting to mix over here? So I have to bring in more color so that you can discern between those trees. There we go. So kind of like that. And I'll put highlights on when they start to kind of dry in a little bit. Other side, you can do similar trees. You can do different trees. If you want to do something that looks more like less like an evergreen tree, more like a actual deciduous, is that right? I don't know. Here we go. So thicker at the bottom, I'm giving you some tree options. You can do the evergreen trees like this the whole way. It's really your choice. So I'm bringing just some green because I can, because I've already got it here. Bringing in a little bit of that red would also be fine. Be careful not to add white like I just did, unless it's closer to the interior, because that would be where the highlight would be. So I'm actually going to work on painting that out right now. There we go. Okay, so fun things about trees is typically they're thicker at the bottom and then they get skinnier at the top, right? Thicker at the bottom, skinnier at the top. And they tend to have like two main branches that branch out from them. See how I'm pulling up some of that background color? And the branches aren't perfect. So they're like, they go up, they go down, they have other branches sticking off of them. I'm gonna mix some colors here. Having fun. They have other branches that stick off of them. They're going in different directions. The key points is typically branches always want to go up. They want to go towards the sunlight. And maybe another one over here. Maybe a couple little ones. A couple more like that. So that's like a pretty basic tree right there. If I wanted to add, look, I've got paint on my paintbrush. I'm just going to utilize it. Mix that in. Delightful. And then you want to add like the full foliage on top. We can talk about that in a minute. I am not going to do it on this one. Otherwise you'd lose a lot of that background color. And be careful when you're adding trees into your background. If you're not happy with what your sky looks like, you do not want to paint your trees yet, because it's going to be really hard to mix and to blend that sky anymore if your trees are in the way. So something to think about. So maybe the order of operations could have gone a little differently, but we learn. Okay, maybe I want to do, while I'm waiting for some stuff to dry, maybe I want to do like a little bush, something like that. Add a little bit of that green that we mixed as a highlight on that edge. And I'm just using that same technique of the like tap, 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 tap that I did over here to kind of mix that all together. There's some options. And maybe I want to add a little bit more of that green into this farther away. Okay, so before I get too into the details with the trees, let's go ahead and go back to that sky because it's had some time to dry. So be careful, because I can see that my paint is in that in-between stage where if I start painting, it's going to start pulling up. If you're in that stage where your paint kind of looks like if you touched it and stuck to your finger, you'd be able to see the color underneath. It kind of looks tacky. Add some water to your paintbrush and it'll help kind of get that paint to flow. So water, paintbrush, paint, and mix. So I'm actually just going to paint over that branch and I'll paint him back in later on. And again, I'm going to layer up that white. Make it really bright. Kind of like that. Kind of smooth some things out. I've also noticed that I've lost a lot of that black, that dark background. So I personally want to get some of that back. So I'm going to mix in my blue and my black like we did in the beginning. And I'm going to bring that back in. And again, the cool thing about painting is that if you make a mistake or you aren't happy with it, wait for it to dry and paint it over. There's no use being frustrated with something when the easiest way to fix it is to let it dry, paint it over again. Where do I want to go with this? A little black in my top corners. Maybe on some of my edges. And there we go. And maybe I can put in my branch now that I'm happy with that sky. Okay, so let's talk about highlights. Highlights are one of those things that if you're one of those people who just, when you get to the end of a project, you're like, I'm done, I'm over it. Highlights, don't get to that point with the highlights. Highlights are what changes your painting from looking like amateur hour to an actually realistic painting. So this is why we've kept a white pile completely empty. I'm actually going to use my detail. I'm changing paintbrushes. Look at this. So I'm going to take this detail paintbrush. I wet it a little bit. And I'm going to get that white loaded onto it. So I've got the tip. Just the tip. Like that. Load it up. And I'm going to start to put in little dots of white. I'm not going to do it on every branch. You can do it, if you actually did stems, you can do it a little bit on the stem. The important part is that you're doing it on the side that's facing the actual, like where the light source is coming from. So the light source is coming from the middle. So that's where I want to do that highlight. And I want to do them sparingly because sometimes if you do too much, it starts looking like snow. And I'm doing a small little dot basically. So just doing them in a couple of areas. I can do a whole line on the tree, like on one of these branchy trees. And then a little bit over here. And this helps differentiate between where the tree actually is and where we are putting that background color, because we're using a lot of black in this picture. Sometimes it helps to put a little bit on the backside, just a little bit as some reflected light. And then again on my last evergreen tree here. Again, don't put it everywhere. Try not to make it super even. All of my people out there who want everything to be symmetrical, please try not to. You will be happier in the end if it's not. Nature tends to not be totally symmetrical. Okay, and maybe I want to add some texture in the side piece. Maybe a little bit more highlight on the edge of this tree. Again, you don't have to do one of these trees. It could be all these fluffy trees. Okay, so we're in like final steps right now. You guys have done a lot. Fun time. You're gonna take the back of the smallest paintbrush you have and you're gonna poke it into the paint. Boop, just like that. Just like that. And now you're gonna do this technique called stippling. And stippling are small, controlled pokes. For all of my friends who are sky people, astronomers, anybody like that, if you would like to do a real constellation, I am fine with that, but please don't get mad at the rest of us who don't know things like that. Okay, so we're doing small controlled pokes to show where our stars are. So you don't really have to get too far in with these. And remember, the smaller something is, the farther away it is. When you're doing something like this. Yes, all of my science people who are like, actually it's brightness. Brightness can be seen as how much the human eye can pick up. So You don't have to do it towards the middle, but for the most part, that's how you're doing your stars in your sky. So think about some small controlled pokes. Okay, so you can be done at this point. This could be where you end it. Also make sure to wipe off your paintbrush. If you would like to add an additional detail, like a moon or some clouds or something like that, we can do that, but I am going to stop it here and I will make an additional video to show that. If this is where you end, this is where you leave me, please, 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 make sure you dump out your water cup and you rinse it out. Also, make sure you get all of the paint out of your paintbrushes. Use a mild soap, rub it around. The easiest thing to do is actually to take your paintbrushes, run them under water, all together, all the tips face down, tap, 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 like this under the running water. A little soap, rub, 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 tap, 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 washes them all out. When the water runs clean, they're clean. Also, paintbrushes, if you store them in water, they're gonna compress and push down the paintbrushes and the actual hair of the paintbrush, and it'll destroy the integrity of it. So when you're done washing them, lay them down flat, give them some space, and let them dry. All right, my people, I hope you had a great time. Again, if you're sticking around to see how to do a moon and maybe some clouds, feel free to, but if you're done, I would love to see a picture of it. Talk to you soon.